Tale of Two Hygienists presents this week's TIPisode. Quick and easy tips to keep you up to date and presented by the experts in the profession. Now, get ready for your unofficial TIPisode. This week brought to you by GC America.
Hi, I'm Spring Hatfield, and I am your host for today's TIPisode. And today we're going to discuss how we better manage our patients' pH levels in their mouths. As most hygienists are aware, the pH in the mouth, and especially the saliva, is an important measure to determining buffering actions and caries risk. This can be assessed through using pH test strips, which is really a simple process that you can integrate into your normal routine of seeing your patients. And though I've practiced at multiple practices across 3 different states, I've never come across another hygienist that actually uses pH strips to test their patients' pH levels in their mouths. I like to do this because it is a learning process for the patient and myself. We can do it together. I test at the beginning of the appointment, preventing any kind of changes attributed to the prophy itself or anything that's put in the mouth. I don't want the patients to think that I did something to change the pH level in their mouth. I want them to come in, sit down, get their pH level checked so that they are responsible for whatever that pH level is. Maybe they're responsible because of their poor eating habits. Maybe they're responsible because they have a systemic disease they're not managing well. There are multiple reasons why the pH level in the mouth can change, but knowing that it is low is the first step to addressing the problem further. So it's important to understand that there is a margin of error. So if the patient comes in and they just had a big gulp soda or some candy like Sour Patch Kids or some crazy thing like that, clearly their pH level is going to be a lot lower than it probably would be at baseline. And this can be misleading sometimes, but at the same time, it gives you an opportunity to do a quick little interview like, did you eat something before you came in or have anything to drink? And if so, it's also an opportunity to teach them and educate them on, look what happens whenever you eat and drink these things. It lowers your pH in your mouth and makes you more susceptible to getting caries. So after collecting the saliva sample, which can be done in a disposable cup, they could just expectorate in the cup, or you can use a cotton tip applicator to swab. But usually I do like the lingual underneath the tongue. That's my favorite way. I don't like them to expectorate in cups because for some weird reason that really grosses me out. But I use the cotton swab. You can do either way. It works. And then you just put it on the pH strip, and together you can visually see the changes, if there are any, and you can compare it to the pH level that it should be and where it is currently. And there are multiple types of pH strips that can be purchased on Amazon. They're really reasonable. They're not expensive. And that's usually where I like to start with assessing pH, saliva pH. And I'll do it a few times to get a baseline on a patient, unless the patient is new to me and clearly has a high caries risk. They come in as a new patient and they just have rampant caries everywhere. I will go ahead and test their pH and say, let's talk about what's going on here if it happens to be low at the time. Otherwise, I might show the patient the pH level is a little bit low and talk about ways that we can prevent that from happening in the future or things that cause it to be lower, and then reassess at several appointments to get kind of a baseline before I just assume that they just walk around with a low pH level all the time. But if you have someone who you take a salivary sample and do their pH and it is consistently low every single time, over and over and over again, you might look into doing a test that will clarify what is exactly causing the pH level to be low. GC America makes a tool that can be utilized in this situation called Saliva Check Buffer. This can clarify what the problem might be with the patient that consistently presents with the lower pH levels, especially when you haven't seen improvement with the usual changes and recommendations that you've made. Saliva Check Buffer identifies, measures, and assesses saliva conditions such as hydration, salivary consistency, stimulated saliva flow, stimulated salivary pH, and saliva buffering capacity. Identifying the problem will help you to narrow down the list of prevention measures that you may need to discuss with your patient. And each patient, of course, is very individual. So when we see consistently that they have a high caries rate, we need to try to address what the problem is. So then we look at what options should we defer to when we check the pH level of the patient's saliva and we get a low reading. Well, obviously we want to start with nutritional counseling, as this is likely the biggest offender. Advising patients to rinse with water, or better yet, water and baking soda mixture after a meal or snack high in sugar or carbohydrates will be the most conservative recommendation and likely the most effective, as most patients won't change their eating habits right away. Look, I'm that patient. I'm not changing my eating habits right away. Also, additionally, baking soda and water rinses are highly effective for pregnant women that experience morning sickness consistently. On my last TIPisode, I discussed how pregnant women were at an increased risk of dental caries due to salivary buffering changes associated with hormones. Baking soda and water as a mouth rinse may be an option for the entirety of pregnancy, not only if they are actually having morning sickness or all-day sickness for some unfortunate souls. It's both cheap and effective and probably going to get the best compliance. But back to the main goal. The main goal may be to get the patients to alter their eating habits, but it takes time and multiple counseling sessions to achieve that goal. There have been identified 4 clear stages of change: contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And I know that we all learned about this in hygiene school, but sometimes we forget that there are steps that patients have to take to meet a goal. And it's not something that happens overnight. They're not going to come sit in your chair and you're going to give them some nutritional counseling and encourage them to eat healthier, more vegetables and fruits and less sugar and carbohydrates and change from soda to water. And they're just going to pop out of your chair magically and be changed. That's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. And though it can be frustrating for us when we're fighting this battle in what feels like we're alone because the patient isn't being compliant, please understand and be patient with your patients because it's going to take them a little while to make a change. And this is a long game. We need to be aware of that and be prepared to repeat ourselves over and over until we start seeing positive changes from patients. In the meantime, we can offer other methods to manage their elevated pH, such as prescription toothpaste and fluoride varnishes at recare appointments. Both are easy and effective with little effort from the patient. I've seen quite a few influential hygienists argue that fluoride is just a Band-Aid and we need to get to the root of the problem. Here's the thing. I don't disagree with this. However, I do disagree with leaving patients vulnerable when we have tools to protect them while they are making lifestyle changes. Lifestyle changes are difficult. They don't happen overnight. If they weren't, we would all floss every day and be physically fit. But come on, we're not. I just had a bag of potato chips and dip for lunch today. That was my actual lunch. Guys, I know better, but I still do it. It's tough. And ignoring the tools that we have is neglecting to treat your patients in a way that will prevent oral disease. Isn't that exactly what your job is? Prevention specialists? Don't we want to prevent these diseases from happening? And even if we have to add certain adjunctive options for the patient, like prescription toothpaste, fluoride varnish, while the patient is making the changes, wouldn't it be better to have your patient have made small changes, come back in and say, I really cut back on my soda intake. Instead of drinking 3 a day, I'm only drinking 1 a day, and I've switched to water the rest of the time. And when they come in, they don't have a new cavity. And maybe that's not because they cut back on soda. Maybe that is because we implemented other things like a prescription toothpaste that's helping them. Either way, it doesn't matter if it was the cutting back on the soda or if it was the actual fluoride varnish or the prescription toothpaste that we may have recommended. Whatever it was, it worked. The patient seeing changes in their oral health, which is only going to encourage them to make more lifestyle changes and get us to where we need to be with the patient. So I want to challenge you to consider making a few changes in the way you treat your patients that consistently present with caries. First, let's measure that pH, and when indicated, take further steps to identify the problem by using a product such as Saliva Check Buffer. Second, be patient. Understand lifestyle changes take time and patients are going to hesitate. Keep supporting and encouraging them. Don't give up on them. And lastly, don't forget or omit the use of products that can be helpful to prevent further disease while the patient is in the process of making changes. Be their cheerleader. I know I certainly could use a cheerleader almost every day, And if I were trying to make such a major lifestyle change, I would need one for that too. All right, guys, well, you have a great day. And if you would like to reach out to me, you can reach me via email at springhatfieldrdh@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to another TIPisode. And thank you to GC America for sponsoring this week's episode. You can find out more about their great products at gcamerica.com. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and head over to our website, ataleoftwohygienists.com, to sign up for our newsletter. And we always appreciate ratings and reviews. Thanks again for listening to your unofficial dental hygiene podcast.